in this lesson, we're going to make our final touches to the remote control car. All right, so let's add the antenna, and then we'll take care of the smoothing that we need to finish off this particular lesson. So let's go ahead and create just a cylinder, and I'm going to go to my top view, and I'm going to create the antenna right about here. I'm going to hit F3 so I can see that being created, and then I'm going to make sure that I get a good height on that, and we're going to hit F3 and P to go back to our perspective view, and let's pull this up and put that right about there. Let's go ahead and adjust our height, make that a little bit higher. We might even go to our left view to see the exact height that we have in our reference image. And we've got a little bit of a taper on this particular object. So I'm going to convert it to editable poly. And then I'm going to go to polygon mode. And I want to select that top polygon, but I don't necessarily want to move away from my reference image. Sometimes this might be helpful. So what I want to do is I want to switch it from this window or the crossing toggle that we have here. So anything that touches the marquee selection will be selected. But if I switch it over to windowed, anything that is encompassed will only be selected. So this may be a good way of selecting polygons like this. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my scale tool and scale that in all three directions. So make sure you're hovering right over the middle here and just scale that down and get the length that you need there. Now I'm also going to go ahead and take a sphere, and I'm going to create that right up here at the very top. And you could leave it just the way it is, or if you want, like I did in the reference image, you could go ahead and flatten it out. I'm also going to align that to my cylinder here just to make sure that it's right. And I'm also going to align its orientation and hit OK. And then I'll pull that back up into position here. Okay, so this is sitting right on top, and I'm going to grab my scale tool and scale that down and flatten it. And then we'll take both of these objects, and what we'll do is we'll make them all one piece. So you could go ahead and attach them, whatever you want to do there, or you could even weld them together in that sense. Let me hit Z so I can zoom in on this object a little bit closer. So if you wanted to, you could remove the polygons off of the sphere and you could weld those. Okay, but you need to make sure that your sphere is 8 sides, not, I believe it was 12 to start out. So I'm going to leave it just the way it is. I'm going to change its color and apply the material, okay, that we've had for this. And you can group those whatever you want to do. Now also, you'll see that it's kind of just sticking out of the car shell. We want to create some sort of object that is covering that up. So I'm going to use a torus, and I'm going to turn on AutoGrid. And what AutoGrid is going to allow me to do is create an object along the local surface or local normal of an object. So if I left click and drag this out, you'll see that it's trying to create this tube along the surface. So if I click on that, you'll see that it's created that ring, and then I can just move that into position. Now I'm going to make sure that I move it in my local position, so that way it follows right along the surface of my object. Okay, let me pull that up, and then I'm going to scale it also in the local direction, and just kind of pull that down. We might even adjust the radius of this just to make sure that it's fitting in there. Okay, let's make sure that that is right on our antenna, not sticking out and kind of in an odd angle. That looks good. So let's change its color, apply our material, and there we go. So things like this are just some final touches that we would have. Now before we end this lesson, we need to smooth out some things in this particular scene. So first off, our car cover, we need to go ahead and smooth it out. So I'm going to go to Turbo Smooth, and you'll see that it flattens out quite a bit on this. So what we'll want to do is turn on Isoline Display, bump up our iterations, and then use our Edit mode and Swift Loop. And let's go to Edge mode, hit 2 on the keyboard just to kind of create those edges so we can see the original. And I'm just going to create a few across here. And actually, let's go right along this side first. So we're going to crease those edges. And on the inside there, I'm going to go across the top right here, so you can see how that's beginning to crease that. Let's go across this way, and then also right across here on each side, and then across the top of the vent. Okay, so if you need to come right across here, do that on each side of that vent, and then also around the top and the bottom. Okay, let's go across this side here just to kind of tighten that up. So you can see how everything is getting nice and sharp here. Looking good. And also across the back of that vent. So everything is getting nice and round. Let's go across the front of our vent on this side. And let me make sure I get the right cut there. Here we go. And I'm going to go across the front right here, and then also on that side, and this side. So let's just kind of do a little bit of an inspection on that. Across the back, we need something there. And there we go. So there is our car cover, looking nice and neat, nice and smooth there. Happy with the way that's looking so far. And a couple of other things that we might want to take care of, like on the springs, go ahead and apply Turbo Smooth to that. Now, at this point, we have a lot of groups, and we want to kind of think about cleaning this up and getting everything ready to go. And I don't know exactly what groups I have, and I don't really think that they're all that important at this point. They were mostly just temporary groups. So I'm going to go to Group, and then I'm going to use Explode. And that's just going to get rid of all the groups no matter how far they're nested. So even our tread objects are individual pieces. So that's okay for right now. I'm going to go ahead and leave it just the way it is. And now what we'll do is we can come in and we can grab the individual objects. We can apply Turbo Smooth and smooth those out. So I would go ahead and do that in between lessons if I were you on some of these. I'll kind of step you through some of these pieces. Let's make sure we show end result. And it's basically the same workflow that we've been using. Just using that swift loop and cutting across edges that we want to tighten up with that geometry. So along the edges here, those are nice and neat. Okay, across the front, if you want to do that. And then across the middle right here to tighten up those braces here. And then also around those corners to make those nice and sharp and angled. And don't forget the backside. Now also isolate those pieces. Might make things a little bit easier. So make a cut there. Just kind of tighten that up there on those edges. Okay, so looking nice and smooth there. I like the way that looks. Let's turn off isolate mode. And we can come in, grab these pieces, and again, apply Turbo Smooth. So you kind of get the idea of how all of that's going to work. And I believe we have all of the major pieces except for this right here. We have that center line that goes through all of this. And I'm going to double click on all of those parts, all those center segments. And I'm going to hit Control Backspace on those to remove their vertices and their edges. So go to Edge Mode and just remove that along the center on all of those. Okay, this one's good. And we have one more right here. It's not absolutely needed. And we could also apply Turbo Smooth to this. So let me add this one. This one might be a little trickier. So we'll go ahead and we'll step through this one. So 2 iterations, isoline display, and show end result. And we'll use Swift Loop. And it looks like something is a little off on this. It looks okay. No, it looks fine, I guess. This was kind of throwing me off right here. So let's go ahead and tighten up these edges. And we'll just go through just like so. We can do this on each side if we wanted to. Okay, and then we'll just continue to work on this, tightening up these edges, just making sure that it's nice and tight. So give me just a moment. We'll work on those. Also, take note of any other areas that you might need to smooth out. And again, it's the same process, same workflow, nothing new in this. So we're just cutting across corners that are smooth, and we want those to harden up a little bit. We want those angles to be preserved and that volume to be preserved. So cut across those segments that are really smooth. So just making sure that I get all of these, inside and outside, those segments, and cutting across those. And even across the top here. Okay, I'm going to create one right here and here. And then you might even cut across the top there, but I think that that's hidden underneath the spoiler, so you don't necessarily have to have that one. And then on each side there. And then also one across the bottom and the top right here. So that frame should now be nice and hard. Should have nice tight features in there. And then now what we can do is we can go ahead and just turn off isolate mode. And everything should be pretty much smoothed at this point. So now that we've finished the remote control car, now what we're going to do is we're going to block out the remote in our next lesson, and we're going to take a look at working with primitives again, and this might even give you a chance to kind of experiment, just kind of look at the shape of the remote and try to figure out your own way for creating that same thing. But again, if you just want to follow along step by step, that's okay, and we'll go ahead and get started with that next.